My whole job involves problem solving at all times. Whether you're dealing with a client, a customer, another fellow employee, or whether you're simply dealing with a spreadsheet that isn't working anymore, you're constantly solving problems.
I think that if problem solving isn't part of your daily proper job, then you're not playing it safe. So yeah, I'd say a lot.
Okay, so if I think of problem solving in my job, as an example, I work in a professional services firm, and my job is to run recruitment events, manage a pipeline of candidates, and disaster does strike and doesn't always go to plan. So for example, I might put on a presentation for 100 students. I've got a senior member of the business, maybe a partner or director, coming in and presenting to these students, but at the last minute they cancel and they say, "I'm really, really sorry, Scarlett, but I can't make it. What do I do?" Okay, so top tips for problem solving. I personally would say make sure that you understand the problem. Don't just jump straight into it, but make sure that you understand the root of the problem. And then finally, I'd say make sure that you take the time to measure how you're doing in resolving that problem, because actually if you come up with some ideas and they're not working, you need to reevaluate.
I'd say when I'm confronted with a problem, I think the first thing you need to do is take a step back, not literally, but actually have a moment to think about what you're going to do. I'd say the second thing is about relationships, establish a rapport with an individual. I'd say the third and final top tip I'd say on problem solving is that you need to have context in what you're doing. So if you go blindly into a situation that you can't address fully on your own, you're not going to achieve the best outcome. Problem solving is super complicated, and actually I think it's mainly based upon relationships. So if you can build a good relationship with an individual, you're probably going to make quite a lot of progress.
So any problem, big or small, actually needs to be resolved. So I always think about, even if the problem's really small, I always think about two particular or alternative solutions that I could follow. But I don't necessarily always implement a problem-solving tool or technique if it's just a small problem, as in I've got too many emails. However, when I notice that a particular problem could have a significant financial impact or could have an impact upon the customer or employee experience, then I will start to analyse the problem from different perspectives and go through the different stages of problem solving in order to find the best solution.
I think that any problem is a proper problem because you never know what potential it has to escalate into something bigger or something worse.
Personally, for me, a problem is something that I can't physically address on my own.
Yes, I do. You can't sit down in a crisis and use blue sky thinking or use a SWOT analysis to work out the best solution to the problem. However, you still need to, and I still do, try to approach the problem in a logical manner. When I'm in the midst of a crisis, I try to just switch off all emotional attachment to that problem and just think in a really clear and rational manner. I almost kind of switch off everything that's going around me and focus on a solution that I need to find, and I need to find it now. And when I'm dealing with other members of the team that I need to give instructions to, I'm just very calm, very clear and very firm, and I remain composed throughout, because I find that that gives the solution that you're suggesting a lot more authority, and people are much more likely to follow your solution and solve the problem.
If you're under pressure and something pops up and disaster strikes, my advice is to try not to flap, stay calm, because usually it's not life or death. And if you can plan ahead to prevent that by having some kind of contingency plan, that's always good. If you haven't had a contingency or backup plan, then think about almost risks versus benefits. So think about what you can compromise on, what things you can't compromise on, in order to be able to give the same positive output.
As a student, there are so many ways that you can improve your problem-solving skills. One way is to attend a skills training session through the SU or through careers to enable you to think about the different approaches that you can take to solve a problem. However, the best way to learn to solve problems is simply to throw yourself into situations where you're going to have to solve problems. So, do things like joining societies, joining sports clubs, getting a part-time job, doing an internship, all range of different things that you can do to start solving problems. And every time you've been faced with a problem and you've tried to solve it, take a step back afterwards and reflect upon how you dealt with the situation and what you do differently next time.
So my advice would be think about what part of problem solving you struggle with. Is it time management? Is it prioritising things? Is it working well with others? Because they all link. And whichever it is that you struggle with, maybe it's all three of them, think about the types of opportunities that will help you improve.
situations we had at work was we had a team of people, but one person in that team was not sat with us. They'd moved to the States. So the problem there was that any little change we wanted, they were our graphic designer, involved a couple of days worth of back and forth. So that was the situation. And we go, how can we do this better? Because we knew long term we needed someone who was in-house, but we didn't have the money. It's basically just trying lots of things. Okay, what worked? Well, it worked quite well if we gave them a clear spec and a few examples of things we liked. It worked quite well if we described everything in a quite condensed manner of like, this is why we're trying to solve it. So we got better at it, but after a few weeks of doing that, we realized it just wasn't working. Eventually then went to our funders and said, look, we need to get rid of this guy and get someone in full time who's part of our team. And that made a huge difference.
Okay, so the situation I was in is I was planning this really big event. There were about 200 students that I was looking to put at this particular event. By the fourth week, I was hoping that I'd have 100 students. I only had 20 signed up. So I had to think about ways in which I could change what I was doing to basically make it successful. So I changed the entire campaign. I did more virtual related stuff. I made sure that I got in touch with societies and clubs, didn't just rely on university contacts, for example, and made sure I really kept on top of it. So rather than just checking it once a week, I checked it every day. I drew on people for advice who were perhaps more experienced than me in project management, and eventually managed to get the sales tickets up to at least 100. So it meant that although we didn't achieve the absolute target, it was much better than it originally was.
So one of the fundamental problems that I faced in the first few months of my role were students talking about finances. One of the big bits of feedback we had was about card charges across the university, and you might remember that there used to be 50 pence every time you use your card under £5. And the amount of feedback we were getting, that was fundamentally changing the way I had to approach the issue and how we challenged that. So the way I went about it was establishing the facts, why that 50p existed, what we could do to change it, and who I had to influence to create that change. We worked out how the situation had come about, so there had been a charge put on the institution, and what the impact that was on students. That period took a long time, and it wasn't fundamentally based on a big campaign, and it wasn't in terms of sitting around a table and engaging with it. It was speaking one-to-one to the individuals who had the power to create that change for students. We successfully brought it down to 20 pence, and then over a bit of luck and a bit of judgment, we brought it down to 0.